everyone. I'm Steve Gentling, the Mayor of Guthrie, and welcome to another edition of It's All About Guthrie. We are so pleased today to be able to visit the Oklahoma Territorial Museum, a fantastic museum right here in downtown Guthrie. Truly one of the gems of our community and our state. It has a great story to tell. We're here with a number of staff that we're going to be talking to during the course of the next few moments. Michael Williams is with me today. Mike,
how you doing?
I'm doing really great. You know, the museum has a great history here, a great story to tell. One of the things is clearly some of the history of things that happened before the land run of 1889. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the exhibits here that reflect some of that time frame?
Yeah. We a lot of people seem to think that when the land run happened on April 22nd, 1889, that's the start of Oklahoma history. But the story goes a lot deeper than that. The 5 civilized tribes' participation in the Civil War on the side of the Confederacy cost them a great portion of their lands in Indian Territory. And these lands are what would eventually become Oklahoma Territory. These are the lands that the boomers wanted to have opened up to settlement. And it was also the land that railroads wanted to pass through on their way to the Gulf of Mexico to open markets for farms in the Great Plains.
You mentioned boomers.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us a little bit more about boomers, because I'm not sure that too many of our public really understand who the boomers were, what their focus was.
Yeah, exactly. We get a lot of people, you hear boomer sooner, and people will always say that the Sooners were the cheaters. Yeah. Okay, so then we ask them, well, who are the boomers? And a lot of times the answer is, well, the boomers are the people that waited for the cannon to go off. It's like, okay, well, no, but no.
Yeah.
That just wasn't right, you know. This was 2 million acres, and we're going to have a cannon go off that everybody can hear and everybody's waiting on. No, that didn't happen. There's guns going off, they're going. But the boomers were people that lobbied in Congress, and they published newspapers, and they actually came into this territory about 16 to 20 times and created settlements, or what we call Oklahoma Territory. They would build farms, plot out, towns, start selling town lots, building buildings, and then the army would come along and escort them out, and then they would burn down any of the improvements that they had made. The boomers are more of a social and political movement that are attempting to get this land open to settlement, and what role they play in the formation of the state of Oklahoma.
Well, lots of names mentioned, but one name that comes up, Elmer McCurdy.
Oh yeah, Elmer.
So tell us a little bit about Elmer and the displays that you have here in this museum that reflect that personality.
Elmer McCurdy is probably, next to the land run, is the main thing that people come into this museum about.
Really?
And we've attracted people from Japan to come here to talk to us about Elmer McCurdy. Back in 1976, he was found in a fun house in Long Beach, California, and he's hanging from a noose, and they've painted him a fluorescent red color so that whenever the mine car that drives through the fun house, the light hits him, he shines and reflects. So he's hanging there reflecting, and they're going to make a TV show, $6 Million Man, the Bionic Man. Yeah. One of the guys working on the set knocks his arm off. He goes back to tape it up. He starts looking at it and notices that it looks like beef jerky, and he's like, there's a bone sticking out of this arm. So wow. The news goes out across the United States, and the then director of this museum, Fred Olds, hears about this with some other people in town, and they make a decision to attempt to bring him back to Guthrie for burial.
Wow.
Because he was an outlaw, he died in a gunfight, and here in Oklahoma. And so Fred's idea was that he needed to come home and be buried,
sure,
here.
Absolutely.
And so they bring him back. They have a huge funeral procession on 89ers Day in 1977, and they bury him at Summit View Cemetery. So he's buried right next to Bill Doolin. In 2011, we realized that we had the gun that killed him here in the museum. And it was just we had a theory that we actually did have the gun. So we started researching and looking into it and digging, and we actually found a newspaper article that explained how this gun that we have was the gun that actually shot and killed Elmer. So if you want to see it, you need to come on down and visit us.
Right here.
Yeah.
Come and see about what boomers are all about, what Sooners are all about, and what Elmer McCurdy's all about.
Yeah.
Right here in this museum. We're here with Nathan Turner, Regional Director of the Oklahoma Territorial Museum. And Nathan, obviously the land run of 1889 is significant for Guthrie and for our state. Clearly, I mean, it was the birthday of Guthrie. So tell us what kind of displays that you have here, and tell us a little bit about the things that you have here in this great museum that portray that land run in that particular period of time for our city and state.
One of the main pieces that we have on the first floors, we have an exhibit that we call Oklahoma or Bust, and it's depicted to look like what a boomer camp or what a settlement camp might have looked like prior to the land run of 1889. All the different things that people would bring with them, from their chair to their clothes to their books, everything is on exhibit there. And then we do talk about the actual run itself and the 2 million acres in the heart of what's now Oklahoma that opened up, and the events surrounding it. This was something that Congress signed the act less than a month before the land run. There were no provisions for laying out towns. There were no town site committees yet. I mean, it was chaotic to say the least.
Now, I've seen some of the flyers that you have preserved here in the museum that talk about the free land, but actually it wasn't totally free, was it?
No, it was not. There was a $14 government filing fee. If you were lucky enough to get land, and we estimate only 1 in 3 people did, for a town lot or for 160 acres, you had to pay a $14 filing fee. Now, we say $14 and everybody goes, oh, I got a 20 in my pocket. Well, that was closer to about $400 in 1889 money. So might not break the bank, but it wasn't just, pocket change either.
It puts it in perspective.
Right.
It puts it. Now, people came with all different modes of transportation.
Yes.
A lot of people came by train, I guess, too?
Yes, there were trains that came out of Ark City, Kansas, and also out of Purcell, Oklahoma, would have been Indian Territory.
And of course, some wonderful write-ups goes into more detail about the day and the events. Now, tell me what did you have to actually settle or have a claim?
Well, the idea was that there would be marks on trees or rocks or posts that they hung up or planted. The problem is almost 30 years later, a few wildfires and things grow, and the cattle that were run out here and so on. And even there's a story about some of the cowboys up at Cowboy Flats, north of town. They were taking cornerstones and throwing them into the Cimarron River.
Wow.
But you had to, at some point, find a marking that told you where you were, and then take that to the land office, of which there were 2. There was one in Guthrie, and there was one in Kingfisher, and that's where you went in to file your claim.
That and a whole lot of more information about that is in this complex, in this building, and you all have done a fantastic job. Let me move the next step. Guthrie was the territorial capital.
Yes.
Then when statehood came upon us, Guthrie was the first capital. Tell us a little bit about that journey to statehood of Oklahoma.
Guthrie was the territorial capital in 1890. We actually became a territory in 1890. It was a territorial capital until November of 1907 with statehood. There were a number of different territorial governors within that time frame. There was never a governor's mansion or any of those types of things were not really built here. Some people, that's their personal home, that's where they went home to. And then on statehood day, November 16, 1907, President Theodore Roosevelt signed the proclamation allowing Oklahoma to become a state. And then on the steps of the Carnegie Library was where the first inauguration of Charles Haskell, our first state governor, was held. And then they had a symbolic wedding on the steps to kind of symbolically show the bringing together, the union of Indian Territory and Oklahoma Territory.
A great, great story to tell for all of Oklahomans and anybody that wants to know more about Guthrie and Oklahoma.
Yeah.
We're here with Aaron Brown, curator for the Oklahoma Territorial Museum. Again, what a great, great museum that we have here, and congratulations to you and all the staff that maintain this. This is absolutely wonderful.
Thank you. We're proud of it.
Yeah, it is a truly true gem. Part of our history of our state is certainly impacted by the African American experience here. I don't think that that's widely known, but you have done a great job with exhibits here reflecting that. Tell us a little bit about how that African American experience has impacted our history in Guthrie as well as throughout Oklahoma.
Absolutely. The African American story here in Oklahoma has really been forgotten or overlooked, and so even in the museums around the state, we don't have very large collections to represent those stories, and so we're always looking for new opportunities to bring that in. So when I started doing research, it was hard to find these holes and these pockets of information, but we have some great collections here for some people that attended Langston University and helped build Langston University. At one point in time, Guthrie had the 6th largest population, African American population in the state, or actually in the country.
Wow.
It was a huge community, and it really is a part of our infrastructure, of our history, of the narrative, our fabric of our narrative here. And so we really had some really interesting stories here. One of my favorites is about the town of Boley, which is one of the most popular all-black towns here in Oklahoma. Boley was really a financial center for African American communities. They relied more on cooperatives and fraternities and sororities and church groups and things like this to help sustain each other financially. Well, there was a gentleman who was bringing his goods to market. He arrived in Guthrie a couple of days late, and so Guthrie Market was already flooded with goods, and so they said, you know what, you need to take your stuff to Boley. He's like, okay, all right. He was new to the area. He didn't really know what to expect. He arrived in Boley, and he was met, people saw him get off the train. He was the only white man in town, so he was escorted to the police station, and then he was escorted to the hotel because he was just standing out incredibly, but he got a great price for his stuff. He made lifelong friendships, and every year after that, he always went to Boley. He was dedicated to the people in the community of Boley because of just what he saw there and how he was treated there.
Yeah.
So,
some great stories of African American being a foundation piece in Oklahoma history, in Guthrie history. So that's really interesting. Clearly, one has to ask, here this little town in the prairie, in the heartland of our country, all of a sudden has this wonderful Victorian architecture facade. How does that happen in the middle of the country in a little town of Guthrie, America, that all of a sudden now has blossomed at the land run and continues to blossom with one of the largest historical districts in the country? How does that all happen here?
Well, the opening of the lands of Oklahoma, and then with Oklahoma becoming the 46th state to join the Union, we were at the center of the nation's story. So everybody was focused on what was going to happen here. So the things that had to be decided for Oklahoma to become a state, the legal issues that had to be resolved, and then the social issues and the political issues, all of those things were going on nationwide. And so everything was just focused, hyper-focused on Guthrie in Oklahoma at that point in time. In 1889 at the time of the land rent, and then again in 1907. So you had international interest, not only national, but it drew people here. So they came from all over the place. They came from Maine, France, and from Germany, people from Canada, from people from Central and South America. So we had a whole bunch of people coming here. The whole idea for the land run was that people wanted to become a state, so they were invested in making this place cool and making it look pretty and having a beautiful home. And so, you know, one of the first homes that was built by our architect Joseph Whocart, he wanted a cyclone-proof home. So it's actually a block north of the museum and it has 18-inch thick walls. And they wanted the new and they wanted the fancy. Electricity. I think it was less than 18 months before we had a power plant on the Cimarron River providing electricity. This is in 1889, you know, when these things are going on. The buildings were constructed, and if you had indoor plumbing, you were fancy. So several of our buildings in the downtown area have a sink in the front of their buildings because they wanted to show how wealthy they were.
Interesting.
So they wanted to show off. They wanted to show their stuff and show that people here in Oklahoma are just as cool as every place else.
Now you mentioned Joseph Whocart. Clearly he was the father of some of the architecture here in Guthrie, which is magnificent architecture. Anything more about Joseph that you have on display here?
We have his drafting tools on display.
Cool.
His tools, his case, his compass, his pens. We have a bust of him as well. Alex Toy is his great-grandnephew, I believe, and he comes to visit us on a fairly regular basis and continues to bring information, and so we continue to learn more about him. He was trained and raised in Belgium, so not only did he embrace the Victorian American architecture, but he brought in the Ottoman influences that you see with the onion domes, and then his signature was the keyhole window, the nearly perfect circle window.
I read a story that was titled, it was about one of Whocart's buildings, I think, and it was titled When the Wrecking Ball Bounced.
Yes, that one was.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes.
And do you have a display here?
We absolutely do.
Okay, this is really good.
That building, one of his, the original City Hall was just a gem of Joseph Whocart's. And in 1955, I believe, the city decided that it was old and run down and we needed a new one. Well, they brought in the wrecking ball and it did literally bounce off the wall.
That's a solid building.
They could not tear it down. It took them 4 days to bring this building down because it wasn't going anywhere. They eventually had to winch cables up to the four corners of the pillars in the front of the building and winch these things down. And there's a lot of people here in Guthrie, several of our docents and our volunteers were kids at the time, and they remember watching this. This was a big deal to watch this building come down, and I'm telling you, those ladies are still mad about it. So they get involved with the preservation meetings, and when they know that something's going on, they want their two cents heard.
Yeah, well,
because
that's good.
They remember that one being gone.
You know, just one of hundreds of stories that are right here on display in the exhibits at this great museum. You know, the part of this complex includes the Carnegie Library. Can you tell us a little bit about the Carnegie and how special it is and what role it plays in your whole complex here?
Absolutely. The Carnegie Library, it was the second one built in Oklahoma. Oklahoma City had the first one, and the rivalry between Oklahoma City and Guthrie was superbly intense for decades. So whatever Oklahoma City did, Guthrie had to do. Whatever Guthrie did, Oklahoma City did. So Oklahoma City got the first Carnegie. They decided we need one too. We're the capital. We need it. So they petitioned Andrew Carnegie to donate money, which he did very generously. They started constructing the building. It took a couple of years. They started it in 1901. It wasn't completed until 1903. But during that process, the community of Guthrie decided that we want a dome. We want a full dome on the building. If this is going to be the capital, we want our library to look stately and important. So they sent a letter to Andrew Carnegie requesting $5,000 more to continue building the dome. He sent the money, but he also sent a letter saying that his opinion was that the money would have been better spent on, books. He wasn't a big fan of the dome. But this was the second one built. It is the oldest one still standing. It is the only Carnegie library in the nation that has the full dome. The libraries at that point in time, they were the center of community. So if you had any kind of civic group or private group, church group, if there wasn't, if the church rooms were filled, you would come to the Carnegie to have your meeting. So this was really the community center.
Yeah.
It was the hub of activity.
And speaking of special places, you can see more and more of this kind of information at this great museum. And now you have tours of the museum?
Absolutely.
Too?
Absolutely. We have tour programs that will fit any age. We can do pretty much anything, and we only have a couple of staff members, but if we can pull it off, we'll do it for you.
It is a wonderful place to come and visit and learn more about our history, our Oklahoma history, our Guthrie history, and the part that a lot of different personalities played in it. Right here in the middle of Guthrie, America. See it. It's a must-see venue. Thanks for joining us for this edition of It's All About Guthrie.